Hiya. My name is Redbean. I work for 30 Minute Interactive. 2 talks ago, I don't know how many of you were attended that one, but I did a brief overview of how to create your own framework in 30 minutes. It took about an hour. There was a lot of talking, a lot of chatting through it, and if you were doing it yourself, it would probably take you about 20 minutes realistically, once you've done it once or twice. But talking through it took me about an hour. I know a lot of you weren't there for that, so I'm going to run through it very quickly. I apologise if there's some stuff that I don't cover as fully, but the concept was, I've worked in web development since 1999 commercially, and I've seen a lot of different code styles come and go. I've always worked with PHP, and over the years, PHP has evolved a lot, but the programmers haven't, and there's a lot of examples on the web. So when newcomers come and learn PHP, they learn badly straight off the bat. So the web is full of bad examples of PHP, and people who learn PHP, most people who learn PHP are self-taught, and they go on and look up things on the internet, and they learn bad practices straight off the bat. They go and do some websites for some companies looking for a cheap option, and they end up making a mess. No offense to anybody, but that's just what happens. So what we're trying to do with PHPBelfast is promote better coding of PHP, using resources that are out there so you can build your applications quicker. There are lots of big frameworks available online, and one of the things about those, well, I'll discuss those as we move through the slides. So there's full stack frameworks out there, and you can self-build, which is what we're going to do, which is what we're going to run over anyway. Full stack frameworks are fantastic. They can be, unfortunately, they can require a large time investment. So if you install a full stack framework like Laravel or Symfony, there's an awful lot to learn. When I first looked at large full stack frameworks a few years ago, I was very put off by the fact that I would install this massive amount of code, not really understand what anything did, look up tutorials on how to make it work, and you felt like you were just configuring something. You didn't really know what was going on. You were just putting in code here, putting in code there. So it can be intimidating from that regard. As a programmer, most programmers want to know what's going on. So, if you do your own self-built framework, you can pick and choose the best. Pick and choose only the components you want to put together. When I say components, there are lots of libraries out there on the internet, which we can pull in, which are proven, been developed for a long time, and they're really good. You can create, by going with a self-built framework, you can create a smaller code base, so it's faster to reuse, it's faster to distribute, it just works faster, because you're only putting in the components you want, so you know exactly what's going on with all the different components. You pick them, you put them in, and you can hook them together whatever way you like. And the components can be swapped out, and we're going to show an example of that now. But the key to this is not that I don't like full stack frameworks. I think they're great, and I actually use Laravel day in, day out as my framework, but I couldn't use it without having an understanding how it's put together. As a programmer and control freak, I want to make sure I know what's going on. So what is a framework? Frameworks are made up of different components. We've all heard the phrase MVC, so model view controller. So the model, which is your information data store. There's a view, which is anything that's output from the app. So that could be API information, or that could be a web page. There's a controller, which gets the information from the model and determines which view to send it to. And then there's the other one that people forget about because they just think of MVC, which is the router. And what the router does is it takes the request and decides which controller to use and what to tell the controller to do. So that's a very key component. That's almost the first thing we need to do. So what do we need to build a small framework? And we need PHP 5.4 plus. Can't use 5.3 anymore. It's officially end of line as of, I think, last week. So they were not supporting it anymore. So any patches or bugs might be in it. Tough luck. 5.4 is great. You need to use it. If your server isn't up to speed, upgrade it. Basic understanding of PHP object-oriented programming. Lots of books out there if you don't already know. I think it's a handy enough prerequisite. You should know that. Or you probably just shouldn't be here. A good IDE or editor. We recommend PHP Storm by JetBrains, and I think we'll have might be a free license available at the end as a randomly distributed. Composer, which is a system for pulling down PHP packages. There's a standard repository online. If you go to getcomposer.org, it'll all make sense. I'll actually show you quickly. I'll be adding some packages using Composer Fantastic little tool, helps you pull in all the components you need and sets them up for you. MySQL server, kind of optional, depending on the database framework you use, but it's a standard thing. We'll move forward with. Vagrant and VirtualBox. I've added this since the last time I did this live talk because that's the way we work from now on, and that's what Dave was talking about. So I've added actually Vagrant 5 to this project, which I'll run you through super quick once we get through these slides. So first part, step one is a router. So you pick a micro framework, and this is for routing. So this handles the request and the response. So if someone asks for /about us, it takes the about us bit, sends it to your code, and works out what to do with it. There's a number of little small routers that are standalone and you can build on. One of them is Silex, which the Symfony framework is based on. The other one is Slim framework, which is a real small one. You can see it underlined there. That's the one we chose. Next one is a controller. So a base controller which we could build. So this is when I was doing this talk originally, I worked through the code while I was doing this. I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to talk through these and then I'm going to just run through the code. But we build a basic controller that can handle then what the router decides to do. So if the router says, give me this page, it can give it to it. So a view, so we're going to use a template system for the views. We're going to send data to them that's sent in the request from the controller. And some of the sample view systems or template systems that exist out there are Twig, Smarty. I used Smarty the last time. Wasn't a popular choice. It's quite old. I've been using it for about maybe 10 years, and it's sort of lost a bit of traction. Big frameworks are using Twig, really, or Blade. So we're going to switch that out today. As with the model, I chose to use Redbean. So for the model, we're going to use a powerful database abstraction class or ORM. So we don't want to be writing SQL queries when we can avoid it, because they're a wee bit, they tie you down to a particular type of database, tie you down to a structure, and they're hard to go and update later. So if you can abstract the database in a way that makes real sense and takes all that away from you, it can really help. The big players are Doctor and Eloquent. I chose Redbean the last time because Redbean is so quick and simple to get up and running with. I'm on Tim, those sorts of issues. But Redbean the developer of Redbean has decided to move away from Composer. He says he doesn't want to have to change the structure of his code moving forward. So it's pretty much library suicide. So we're going to switch that out as well today. So then we've completed the framework at this point in the last talk. So I'm going to flick back to the code and let you see what we achieved. First of all, I have the Vagrant file open here actually. If you remember at Dave's talk there, he talked about VaproBash. This is a Vagrant file produced by VaproBash. It's essentially the same Vagrant file that we saw Dave write earlier, but there's lots of defaults put in here. So these are all here by default. I didn't add any of them. So you can see here it sets server IPs, memories. You can change the default MySQL password and the languages you want. And if you want some of these extensions for Ruby, you can put them in. So literally, you just scroll down, and the things you want, you uncomment. So you want gulp, bower. See what else there is down here. Excuse me, I've actually left some of the stuff in now. But you see that there's loads of these lines, provision-based packages, so you can then pick, well, I want PHP, I want Nginx for my web server, I want MySQL for my database, I want SQLite as well. And you just uncomment them. They're, by default, they're all just sitting with a comment like that, and you just uncomment the bits and bobs you want. Mail catcher. So I've put this Vagrant file on here and included it as part of the project. So whenever you check this out of Git tomorrow or whenever you dutifully do to try it out, you'll be able to just do a Vagrant up and you'll be up and running in no time. So I'm going to talk through very briefly, or as briefly as I can anyway, what we did the last time. You see here there's a folder layout we created. Get rid of that. And first thing in any project is to create on any website, is to create a public folder, and that's a folder where the user will actually browse to. So whenever they hit a file or they request something, it'll end up at index.php on the server. So if we open index.php, we're basically going to run you can see there we're requiring in a setup file and a roots file, and we're running the app at the bottom. That will all make sense in a moment. So if we go to the setup file first, it's the first thing that happens. You see here, as with all Composer projects, we have to do a require of the autoloader. We then are instantiating a new instance of Slim, which is the Slim framework we talked about earlier. Very easy to set up. In that instance, I used a Smarty view, which was the template engine that we talked about. And we configured that view a little bit. Smarty needs some folders to write cache files and stuff in. And it had a few extensions, Slim provides, which we'll talk about later as well. Then the next part, I set up the Redbean. You can see how easy it is to set up that database. And then I set up a post repository, which we'll revisit later. Don't really want to get into that right now. And then the other component that was read in by index.php is the roots file. So if we go to the roots.php file, these are the roots that are available. So if someone requests /hello with a name, the name being a variable, then it will use PHPBelfast controller's base controller, and it'll use the function hello within that. If someone requests posts, again, this project is exactly as I left it at the end of the last one, so excuse me if it's a wee bit messy. But we should be able to, if I did pick it up correctly. There we go, I've got it. Now, I have no root in for the home page. So if we go back to our file here, you see I don't have a root to say what to do if you request nothing. So if we go to, if we say get slash, this is a very basic root. So before we did controllers or anything, you say if you get slash, pass it a callback function, and you might echo hello. So if we go and refresh that, hello. So if we request /hello/Andy, that is the root that's requested here from this line, where we're saying hello, name Andy is passed in, and we use the base controller. So apologies if I've rushed through this, but this is the starting point that we got through the last time. Hopefully you'll understand the concepts of controllers and these sort of things. So if we open up base controller and look at hello, maybe that might help explain. So let's look at base controller. You'll see here we do some basic things. We're grabbing the instance of Slim. That allows us to get information about the request and response. We set the view for Slim just to give us an easy way to access it. And we have the hello function here. So whenever we call that root hello with Andy on the end, passes the word Andy in as this parameter, sets that into the view, and renders the hello.tpl file. If we look at that, you see we have output the variable name in here. Ignore the other syntax for now, we'll get to that in a second. But it's passed that word Andy into that view and says hello Andy from view. So if we go back to our code, you can see that that's what's happened exactly. So whatever you pass in here ends up coming out in the template. So that's just a simple example of how information gets passed through the router, through the controller, to the view, and there we go. So the next thing I wanted to show you was the post controller. Excuse me, this screen's quite small, I'm quite used to it, so I'm trying my best here. And you see here, I've said any routes that go into /posts to use a post controller index method. So if we open that up, this goes and gets some posts from the repository, which we'll talk about in a little while, sets them into the view, and renders that view. And so if we go to /posts, there we go. We've got some example posts in there, just some random text and images. So it's all very simple. If you look at the posts view that it renders there, see it's in /new/index.html. or index.tpl rather, TPL being the extension used by Smarty. See, looping around the posts, outputting article, some divs, and we're passing in post. Each post, we output the image, we output the URL where we're going to link through to, and we output the title of the post. And that's what we're seeing on that screen. So what I'm going to do is try and tidy this up a little bit. I'm going to switch out the template engine because, say, Smarty wasn't popular, and Twig is maybe a wee bit more readable. And I am going to also switch out the database that we're using because Redbean, as I say, just isn't working. But this will demonstrate how easy it is to switch those things out. It doesn't require a complete rewrite of the code. You can just download these components, put them in as and when you want. So is everybody happy enough? Has anyone any questions at this stage before I move on? I know I've basically gone through what it took me an hour the last time. So if anyone has any quick questions, you can ask them now or ask me after. The repository for this is available on GitHub. If you go to the PHPBelfast.com site, you'll see the link to it there. You can have a bit of a further examination. So what we're going to do is, I wanted to use Twig for views, so let's tackle that first. And I'm going to drop to the shell here for a second. I'm going to vagrant SSH. As you remember from Dave's talk, we're going to go into the vagrant box. And I am going to go to /vagrant folder. That's the shared folder that David talked about earlier. That's automatically shared. So if I look at my files in here, this is the files of my project. I'm going to run composer install, or require rather, sorry. And I'm going to search for a package. In this case, we want Twig. Search for Twig gives you a lot of options. Pick the one we want. Any version as well will do for now. Away we go. And this is how great Composer is. Composer installs these things, puts them in the right folder for you, and they're then available to your project. Not cached, obviously. And then the other one, we're going to put in the Twig extensions too, which we might or might not use, but just in case. So if I search for Twig again, I can add in the Twig extensions. And again, any version will do. And if you haven't used Composer before, it's fantastic. Because you can pull all these packages in, it automatically sets up the paths and the include suite, so it's easy to pull them in your code. So if we go back to our code, we have a look at our setup.php, which set up the view for Smarty. We're going to change this slim views to Twig. We're going to leave the templates path where it is. I actually have, to save me just deleting all that, I actually have a we snippet saved there. So you can see we changed the views to Twig. We've set up some different options there. We've told it what folder to use for caching, and we've pointed it at the slim Twig extensions. Slim Twig extensions we'll cover shortly when we get into the views. So that's our basic. If we do that and we refresh our page, we'll see now the views aren't being rendered correctly. They're not being parsed because they're not Twig files. It's just dumping out the raw Smarty code because it doesn't know how to handle it. So what we need to do is go into our views and edit them and make them into Twig files. So if we open up our news one, that's the one we were looking at there now. You see that we're extending layout.tpl. So let's first of all change that to Twig. So before we do that, we need to change this to a Twig as well. And you don't have to call it Twig, you can actually call it whatever you like. But by calling it Twig, you're enabling the editor to highlight and colorize things nicely because it knows then, oh, it's a Twig file. Oh, wasn't expecting that. Sorry, I'm confused now. Yeah, so it knows it can now highlight this correctly. So you see now that the extends and the block commands and all that good stuff are all not highlighted because they're not Twig code. So if we change this out, let's see, to percentage, and we say extends. It's very similar syntax for Twig. Maybe a wee bit easier to read. And we can do these blocks now. Just to explain this while I'm talking, how extends works is you can extend a template, and a template will have these predefined blocks of header in this case and content. So by defining them in here, you're saying replace the things in the template you're extending that are called header and content with the code we have in here. So let's move that up. The for command in Twig is a little bit different. So let's, I think it's for post in posts. Sometimes I think these things just try to be different for the sake of it. I say when you're used to using one thing for a long time, take a wee minute or two to get used to doing it. But basically all I'm doing here is changing the syntax of these to the Twig syntax, and I've got a couple more to do, so it's taking longer than I suspected. Let's see. And we're date formatting that, so we can, I think Twig, the equivalent is that. And let's see, the URL for here. Now what this URL for function does, if anybody's curious, we have named the root to the post item. And we'll see that actually. I'll just flick back very quickly to the roots file. And we have named, side a wee bit. We have named this root. So this is the root for an item. So if you pass an /post/id in, and the ID is numeric, we're just going to check here, then it uses this root here to post controller item, but it has a name of post item. So in the template that outputs that, this is what the wee slim extensions were for. There's a URL for, and now the syntax is a wee bit different. Again, not drastically different, but Twig, all the different templating engines have their own way of doing things. Post.id, and let's see. I think that's it. So if we refresh that now, application error. Oh, the layout. We have not renamed the layout yet, so let's quickly do that. Get rid of those. Some things I just can't do without the mouse. Vector. And we'll have to fix up this file as well, quickly. And again, this is the template file that I mentioned earlier where we're extending this. So these blocks that are defined in here will get replaced by the blocks in the other template. If you're used to templating engine, most of them work the same way. So if we refresh this now, there we go, we're up and running with Twig on that template. It wasn't too difficult. And our link, if we click on that and we look at the URL bar at the bottom, you can barely see that, but that's correct. It's got the ID of the record in there. It's formatting the date correctly, so we know that's working. Brilliant. So a couple more templates to do. Done that was the toughest one. We'll just sort those out now, so we don't have any errors later on. An item is very like the listing when it's got an extra field, so we can just copy all of that to the item. Save this as index.twig. Let's see, just paste it in. So bear with me here, apologies. I probably should have done this bit in advance, but I wanted to show how easy the process is. A wee bit time consuming maybe for a demonstration, but not too bad. We're nearly done. And we've added a summary here, so put that summary in. We don't need the link to the title. Let's post.sorry. Okay, so we can delete all that old Smarty code. Is that highlighted red? Oh, well done, thanks Steve. So we'll just tidy that code up with a handy wee shortcut in PHP Storm. So here we have our Twig template for an item. So now if we go to an item, keep going for this for the mouse, not otherwise. Again, sorry, we're pointing in the post controller, we're actually looking at the TPL file. So let's have a look at that. Item.twig, we renamed it. Reload. There we have our item page. So we've switched over to Twig. That wasn't actually that bad. How long did it take? Too long. But let's now, so we've moved over to Twig, we're all happy with that. Let's move over to move our database over. You can see there we switched over to that, and it wasn't that painful. We've changed our template engine, we've changed a major component of the framework. If you picked up Symfony or Laravel, you'd have a much more difficult time switching that over. And also you're getting to understand where the bits you need to change to make this work. So if we go back to our setup.php, and we had used Redbean before. Very easy to set up. I'm just going to delete that, and I'm going to put the database system that the site uses, the one that Laravel uses, and it's called Eloquent, and it's nice, and it's very extensible, and it's very easy to use, and it makes very English readable when you're doing things, which is one of the reasons I like it. So I'm going to, instead of just putting all the setup in that one big setup file, I'm actually going to require in a separate file for this, just because it's a few lines of code, and I don't like to make my files too long. So if we go to the current directory create a directory called config and call it database.php. And let's see where I'm here. Okay, so directory config file database.php. Have a wee snippet here again to save us a bit of time. So the database system, Eloquent, uses this concept. It uses very strange terminology. First of all, it's known as Eloquent, but it's actually called Illuminate Database. So go figure. But we basically can set up a number of different databases. So this is the MySQL setup. You pass in user stuff, database, username, password, character set you're going to use, or you can do an SQLite one if you want. You create a new instance of this database. You add your connection to it, your connection configuration. You set your fetch mode to make sure you always get an object back rather than like an array, and you set that as the global database connection for your project. And that's really it. Now you can find this snippet anywhere online for setting up Eloquent. It's dead easy. So if we save that, the one thing we haven't done yet is actually install that. So go back to our command line and we'll do composer require. And we'll search for Illuminate. As I said, it's called Illuminate Database. And you'll see there, Illuminate Database number 3. And we'll take any version. When you do star, it generally gets the most recent version. Pull that in. I thought these should have been cached. I'm not sure why they're not. But now Eloquent has a few dependencies. They're all quite small, not very complicated. The first one there is called Carbon, which is like a date time function extension, which will give us some useful features there. Doubt we'll get to them today. We've got some support classes there. Again, some of these are out of Laravel, so they're because this database is used in the Laravel framework, it comes with a few components that are used in Laravel. They're all pretty small, pretty simple, nothing really to worry about. If we go back to our code again, we've added this in. That's all fine. So if we go back to our setup.php, let's just see what I did in there. It's all good. Now, earlier on we talked about the post repository. And what that is just it's a class, if you like, that goes and gets information from the database for us, so we don't have to put code into our view or code into our controller that handles database transactions directly. We don't want to do that because that's adding a dependency on that. It's adding another place you have to go and change when you change something. So if you create these repositories, you can just change how these repositories work. It's a one hit to change your database. So that was one of the reasons I did that. So if we go to our post repository, let's try that again. Post repo. And you see this is using Redbean here. So how are we going to get this? You can see here how easy the Redbean commands were, and to be honest, the Eloquent ones won't be much more difficult. Redbean, you could say, use Redbean, find all the things in the post table and order them by that field. So you have wee bits of SQL in there, but very easy, and that just returns you a load of objects. Or get by ID in the repository, where use Redbean, loaded the post with that ID. If it was empty, return false, otherwise return the post. Easy. So how are we going to do this in Eloquent? Well, Eloquent uses the concept of a model. So if you want to access a post in a table, you need to create a model that says this is a post. So I'm going to very quickly create a wee folder here under PHPBelfast called models, because we're keeping everything nice and namespaced here. Along with, I'm not sure if you can see that even down the right. We're keeping controllers in a controllers namespace, models here, repos there. Just keeps the project nice and structured. If you're a wee bit OCD like me, it certainly helps. Makes it easier when someone else comes along too, just to see what all the different components are. So we're going to create a new model here, and it's called post.php. And we're going to tell it the namespace first. So namespace PHPBelfast /models. And we're going to say class post extends, and we talked earlier about extending the Eloquent model. So if you see model there, PHP Storm very nicely searches our whole project and finds anything with the word model. And you'll see there it's found top result, Illuminate Database Eloquent model. So it automatically imports that for us, so we don't have to use the full notation every time I mention it. And if we look at our database, I don't have SQL Pro running here, excuse me. SQL Pro is a very handy little database app, which I have not set up yet, excuse me. PM 733. This was set up from a previous test, and I have not set it up for Vagrant. So I'm just going to very quickly do that. It won't take long. The password is actually a key file. So this is how you set up. Didn't really want to have to go into this, to be honest. But this is how you set up SQL Pro to access the database that's inside your Vagrant box. So MySQL is running inside our Vagrant box, and to access it, you need to grab this little private key here, which allows us to get into the Vagrant box without really using the username and password. And the SSH port, as we discussed earlier, is 2222. So if we save that, we connect. Yes, that's fine. And we're in, and we look at our database that we created earlier for the, you see that there's the post table and there's all the posts. And the table's called post. So by default, Eloquent, unfortunately, being the opposite of Redbean, and again, sometimes I think these things just are out to vex us. It uses plurals for its table names, whereas Redbean used singular. So we can just to get over that little hump, we'll just tell it that this table for this model is post. And that's all we have to do. We can now go to our post repository, and we can say return post. Again, PHP Storm nicely auto-completing PHPBelfast models post. It knows it's an Eloquent model, so it's given us all this nice autocomplete. All. And if we want to order them, we can actually do order by date descending. And we actually just use get as the default, is the better way to do that. So that will actually do exactly what the Redbean command did. It's going to get posts ordered by date descending, and it's going to just get them. So before you do a get, really everything you're doing there is building up the query. So you could add where something equals something and whatnot. And if we have time there, I'll maybe show you an example of that. And for an ID there, again, we're going to use our post model. And we're going to say find, and we pass in the ID. And that's it. That's our database replaced. So if we go back here, we'll reload the post. It still works. And go back page, and our posts list is still working. So everything's still working. We've actually switched out our ORM, our database system entirely there. And we've had to do very little work, less actually than the Smarty template. Very easy. So again, the benefit of decoupling this repositories, this repo from the overall system, just meant that we could go in there and change it. We didn't have to go into our controller here and our controller there. Anything to do with posts comes out of this. Now, one other thing, let me just check the time here. How are we for time, Tim? Sorry, I know I've run on a wee bit here. If you give me another 5 minutes, I just wanted to show one other thing. The other piece of script that we had in here that used Redbean for database was the Cedar script. Now what the Cedar script did was it created the database for us and actually inserted a load of records. So that database you see in SQL Pro there, we have title, date, summary, image. That was all randomly generated. And we showed that in the last talk. So if we go and have a look at that little script, so find cedar.php. See, we used Redbean at that point, and we used this fantastic little composer plugin called Faker, which gives you lots of fake data. So you can ask Faker for a name, as we've done here, ask Faker for a date, and it just gives you real life data, or real life-ish. So you end up with something like this. It's all just random, but at least it's more realistic than lorem ipsum everywhere, or than test story 1, test story 2. So you see here our Cedar was quite simple. Redbean is very clever, and that Redbean automatically creates a table. If you ask it for a post object, and then you set a title and date, Redbean would have automatically created that table, created those fields for you, and that's really handy. Eloquent, which again is just I think it's a more practical choice for this system moving forward. You have to define those tables. So we're going to go ahead and do that in here. We're going to replace this Cedar script, so that it will make the whole project complete and 100% running on Eloquent. So the first thing we need to do is, in this script, we're going to use, a pizza's not a good thing to have in between talks. We're going to use that capsule, database capsule thing that we talked about earlier. I wish I had a better name for it. I'm not sure why it's called capsule. I must read up and find out. But I like to just call it DB, you see there. So I will use that class and I'll call it DB just so I can reference it easier. It makes more sense. I'm going to comment all this stuff out for now because it'll break our script. And I'm going to say how you create tables in Eloquent is a wee bit different. So first thing we want to do is we want to delete the old table. So we'll say you can get the schema object, which is the database schema. So you do db : schema, dead easy. And with that schema, we can do operations. So we can say drop if exists, post, dead easy. So if the table exists, drop it. It's called post. We want to create a new one. And remember we said earlier that by default Eloquent uses plurals, so we're going to do a schema create. We're going to call it table posts, and I'm going to call it. And again, this is another callback function, which you see quite a lot in stuff these days. And in that function, you pass it. It's automatically passed the table. So this create method will try and create a table called posts, and you'll define it using this table object. Now, if we do table here, we don't know what it is, and we don't know what functions are available. So we can import the class, and I just know from experience that that's called blueprint. And you'll know from any examples that the table is a blueprint, and this will just allow, you don't have to type hint like this, but it will allow, it will just allow PHP Storm, our editor here, to autocomplete. So now when I do table arrow, we see all the options. So first thing we always need in a table is an ID field, an incremental primary key. We can do big increments. That means it's a big integer that automatically increments, and we give it a name. So that's our ID field. If we just look down below at our comments here, we also need a title. So we've got, and that'll be a string. So you say table string title. And you can optionally pass a number of characters that you want that to be. We could say table, we're not going to do date, I'm going to get to that in a second, but if we use summary, or sorry, text, it's a text field. It's going to contain some paragraphs of text called summary. And the other one that's on down the page a little bit here is an image. So let's put in an image, which again, that's just going to be a string referencing an image URL. And that's it, that'll create our table. So if we go to the command prompt, and the Cedar script, I don't know if anybody remembers from before, you just simply run PHP Cedar. No errors, it's always good. And we go and look at our database. And hopefully now we should have, the table's called posts, and we've got our structure in, and that's all it took. It wasn't very hard, we've created a database table. The benefit of doing this stuff programmatically rather than doing it in your database editor is you can put in code to create tables on the fly. You can put in code to edit the tables on the fly if necessary. Something we'll go into further in later talks. So what do we want to do with this now? Well, first of all, post doesn't exist anymore, and every time we run this script, we're going to blank the database and start again, so we're going to drop posts. We can also, at this stage, before I forget, go back to my post model, and we no longer need to say what table this post model is associated with. Eloquent is clever enough to know, oh, it's called post, you must mean posts. So that's all our model needs to be right there. We'll go back to our Cedar script, and we're going to put some entries in. So let's just copy this out. So we're going to loop around 20 times. We're not using Redbean anymore, so we can't dispense a post. And we're going to do new post. Yes, Redbean was very interesting for its strange puns on beans and bean dispensers. It was very weird. But new post. Now, it hasn't auto-completed that, so if we do post again and hit enter through Belfast models post, we're going to set the title. Don't have to change that. We're going to set the date. Now, we didn't set a date earlier, and one of the reasons is Eloquent has this concept of timestamps. So we can put timestamps in here, and what that'll do is that'll create a field called created at, and a field called updated at. And those fields are automatically, anytime you use Eloquent to update something or change something, they're automatically put in. So you don't have to set them. And it's handy just to keep using those. You can reference them in all sorts of ways later, but it's handy just to always have those, and that's all you need to do to enable them. So if we can, instead of setting the date, we can set created at to be a random date and time this month. We're going to put a summary in, a paragraph. We're going to leave this little bit of code exactly as it is. This literally lets us get those random URLs that you saw. Those random images rather. That just gets a random image URL from a site called Lorem Pixel, where it can give you a random image based on a category. So I was just showing there how there's this random element. So you can get a random element from this array and concat it on here to make up your image URL. We're also going to add in very quickly, just because this makes the image less random, and it makes it easier to visualize that nothing's changing. We're going to add in a digit. So that's just going to be a number that's greater than 0. A random number greater than 0. And to save the post in Eloquent, just do post rsave. And I think that's us. If we do Cedar now, no errors, brilliant. Go back to SQL Pro, refresh things. See, it's added our timestamps automatically for us. And if we go to content, it's populated the database there with a load of useful content, and our dates are in, our random dates are in. And in theory, I've probably forgotten something. If we go back here, yep, you get a big error. That's totally what I expected. And that's because we changed the date field to be created at. So we need to go to our post controller again, and our post repository, and change that to created at, because we're ordering by that. And also, if you remember in our views, so our index view, we reference date as well down here. I mentioned earlier actually about the little package that it added. When you installed Eloquent, we added a package that gave us some extensions to the datetime object called Carbon. And one of the really handy things that it has is a function on all the dates in Eloquent that, and one of them is diff for humans. And what that means is, the way you see in Twitter, well, it'll be pretty clear when you see it. You'd often see on Twitter or Facebook, X hours ago, X days ago, instead of just being a date. So if we refresh this now, we're not seeing a date at all. That's because I spelled it wrong. And there you go. So we see, got all our posts. We've got all our images. This time the images aren't random. They're always going to be the same ones. Makes it a bit easier to work with. If we click through here, that's working too. So happy days. One other thing, the last thing I wanted to do was our code, our site at the minute, our wee demo site that we created is fairly blank. There's nothing really going on. So what I wanted to do was just add some bootstrap code in to tidy up the template. So whenever you download this and have a look at it yourself, you'll know something's happening and it's working right. So we're going to go to our, what did I just do there? We're going to go to our layout view first. Oh. And we're going to, I like to use Bootstrap. I find it incredibly easy just to get a site up and run really quickly, especially when you have, like I do, some code snippets saved on this machine. So I think I have BSJS, Bootstrap JavaScript, and I think I have, let's see, we also have a navbar actually, BS navbar. Oh, help if I could spell. Yes, BS for Bootstrap, not the other. And so let's have a wee look now what we're doing. Oh, that one doesn't use it. Excuse me. Posts. So we've got a nice little toolbar at the top, and we can add links to that. And we might want to add a link to that posts page. So href equals, and we'll use that URL for. And we haven't actually created the name for this page yet, but we'll do it in a second. And I like to use this sort of dot notation. It's easy to read. So you're looking at posts and you're looking at the index view, because it'll be post.index, post.item. So if we go back to our roots file, and we can actually just give this reroute here a name, posts.index. We can maybe just change that just to be more consistent to post.item. And we have used this actually in the posts index file, so we'll just jump over to that. Just change that very quickly to posts.item instead of post.item. Let's have a wee look now. There we now have a wee title, albeit a wee bit small. We have a little page up there that links to that. Now we haven't specified a URL in there, so if we were to go, this is the beauty of using that wee URL for thing. We can actually change, I can change that whole post system to just be called, for example, news, just by changing that there, and refresh, page not found, because there is no post page anymore. It's only called news, and our link to posts is called news, and all this still works by changing one word. That URL has changed. Very easy. It's the benefit of rooting. So let's change it back to posts, so because that's what we're calling it. Oh. So why do we go and have a look at our wee homepage again, and give it a homepage? So when someone first installs this site and runs it, they see something, and then we'll call it a day. I don't think we can do much more. If we go to our roots file, rather than just passing a function in line there, which is just messy, let's have a look at. Let's create a controller method called home. And we'll give it a name of home. And go to our base controller. Great. We'll just copy this for speed. Home doesn't need any parameters, just the home page. We need to set anything, and let's render home.twig. Then we need to create home.twig, so what we're going to do, we're going to extend our layout again. Twig. We're gonna bit block. We'll just give it some sample content. And I think I have another wee div dot. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Jumbotron for? Yeah. Welcome to PHP Belfast. Let's see if that miraculously works. First go. There we go. So just got a nice wee home page, something on it. I think that we're going to have to call it a day at that point because I wanted to show a wee bit more, but I think we're just run out of time. So thank you very much. I'll make this what we've done so far available on Git. I'm going to do a few further tidy ups on the code there, and I'll put it up in Git, and we'll put it on the PHP Belfast site. So if you check it out over the next couple of days, it'll hopefully be there.
Yeah, we do have a GitHub channel, github.com/PHPBelfast. So as soon as Andy tidies that up, it'll get posted up there. There is the old version up there, but you might want to talk this new one before you go into that. Last thing, I suppose, is sponsorship perks from O'Reilly and iPress. So feel free to grab those codes and use them. You get some discounts off ebooks and even print books with those. Just